Ready to shock your opponents? The Blackmar-Diemer Gambit is all about fast development, early sacrifice, and brutal attacks. Let me show you how to use the Blackmar-Diemer Gambit to crush your opponents. Right away, you're attacking the central pawn. Your opponent will likely go ahead and defend it, and then you attack it again. After the trade, this accelerates the development of your knight. Now you can see that, at the cost of just one pawn, you've gained a lead in development and central control. You have open diagonals and files for your bishops, rooks, and queen, which makes your attack much easier to launch. At this point, your opponent has a few options, but most will go for the usual panic and pray strategy, developing one of their minor pieces passively. Let's start with this common setup, which is slightly more challenging and provocative. Here, they put pressure on your central pawn, but you can easily handle this by developing your light-squared bishop, pinning their knight to the queen. Not only does this remove the pressure on your center, but now you can push your pawn to d5, using the pin to win their knight. To stop that, they'll often play bishop to d7, breaking the pin. Then you simply castle kingside. Now they'll go pawn to a6, trying to complete development and prepare to castle. But their king is still stuck in the center, and this is the moment to strike. You open up the center with pawn to d5, initiating a series of trades. Pawn takes pawn, you recapture, and continue attacking their knight and central control. After all these trades on d5, which are among the most commonly played responses, you're left with a powerful initiative and every piece aiming at the heart of your opponent's position. Right now, it's interesting. Your position is already winning. That's why I said the Blackmar-Diemer Gambit is so tricky. So far, your opponent has played all normal-looking moves. They think everything is fine, but in reality, there's no hope left. They'll usually play this standard move. But now you strike with knight to g5, targeting the f7 pawn, which is a major weak spot. Also notice your rook is already active and well positioned. This becomes useful in almost every variation of this opening. For example, if your opponent captures your knight on g5, it's already checkmate. Your rook supports the queen, and there's no way for them to escape. If instead they try to castle kingside, you can take their pawn on f7, forking their queen and rook. They still can't take your knight because it's guarded by both your queen and rook. So you just recapture, win material, and keep the attack going. If they move the queen away to safety, you have all kinds of discovered checks at your disposal. The strongest one here is knight to h6, a double check from the knight and the rook. The king has to move, and then comes the classical queen sacrifice leading to the smothered checkmate, one of the most beautiful and brutal checkmate patterns in chess. And here's another great thing. This gambit can also be played against other common defenses, like the Scandinavian defense and the Caro-Kann defense. For example, against the Scandinavian defense, you simply play pawn to d4, and you reach the exact same position after playing knight to c3. Now you're attacking the d5 pawn, and the game transitions right back into the familiar Blackmar-Diemer Gambit. You continue with pawn to f3, attacking the d5 pawn a second time. After the usual trade in the center, you develop your knight, building pressure and speed. Now, bishop to g4 is probably the most played move by black in this position. It looks natural. They're developing their bishop, pinning your knight to the queen. But ironically, it's not such a great idea. You push pawn to h3, asking the bishop a simple question. What are you going to do now? From here, you've got great attacking ideas no matter what black chooses. If they trade on f3, that actually helps you, because now your queen develops actively onto f3, eyeing the b7 pawn and putting pressure on the rook in the corner. Also, note that black just used two moves to trade off a developed piece, and all they did was help you activate your queen for free. Now they'll usually try to cover the b7 weakness, and if they go knight to c6, then you already know the plan. You play bishop to b5, pinning their knight to the king, and the attack continues with force. Now comes a powerful crisscross tactic. You're putting serious pressure on the knight on c6, and soon you'll push your pawn to d5 to completely overload that knight. This combination can quickly win you the game. Let me show you an example. Not a forced line, so no need to memorize every move, but it demonstrates the core idea. This central pressure becomes unbearable, especially once your d-pawn joins the attack. In one game, black played queen to d6, trying to stabilize. But then you strike with pawn to d5, and suddenly the knight on c6 is in big trouble. Black tried to counter with pawn to a6, hoping for some counterplay, but after you capture on c6, your pawn keeps advancing. And now you have a strong, dangerous passed pawn, very close to promotion and directly attacking the rook. Black plays rook to b8, trying to pressure the b file, but now the strongest idea for white is pawn to a4. You actually want to open up the a file. If black captures on a4, then your rook becomes incredibly powerful. dominating the a-file and creating serious problems for black. If instead black pushes the b-pawn forward, then your knight jumps into the attack, advancing and putting pressure on both the queen and the c7 pawn. Again, it's very difficult for black to respond. Even if they try a check, you can simply block it. And now black is left with all the same weaknesses. Plus, you now have queen to c6 check coming, which is yet another annoying and dangerous threat. If black tries to counterattack here, you have a really brilliant solution. At first glance, it may look like you're under pressure. Your bishop is attacked, and there's a pin on your knight, so it seems like black is gaining the upper hand. But here's the cool part. You simply castle kingside, cold-blooded and calm. Now your rook comes directly into play, immediately attacking the knight on d5. If black gets greedy and captures your bishop on e3, thinking they've won material, that's actually a blunder. Because now your rook swings across and it's checkmate. They completely overlooked the rook's activation. A classic trap. A better move for black would be to defend the b7 pawn with another pawn. That way, their central structure becomes very solid and hard to break. So what should you do then? Well, let's not forget. Your pawn on d4 is currently hanging. You've got two strong options here. First, you can go with a standard and reliable plan. Simply develop your pieces, keep central control, and wait for tactical opportunities. It's a sound, positionally strong approach. But if you're the kind of player who wants to go all in for the win, then there's a more aggressive idea. You push pawn to g4, going all out with your kingside attack. It's bold, it's sharp, and in many cases, it works extremely well to crush your opponent quickly. But this line is a lot more double-edged. Ideally, you should be familiar with the ideas before diving into it, but don't worry, I'll show you one typical concept so you can understand how it works. Let's say your opponent gets greedy and captures the second pawn. You respond with bishop to e3. Yes, you're now down 2 pawns, but you're far ahead in development, and your opponent's queen is wandering around chasing pawns, not helping their position. Even if the queen hits your b2 pawn, it's not a concern. You simply castle kingside, activating your rook on the open file. After black plays pawn to a6, trying to finish their development, you push forward with pawn to g5. That was the whole idea behind advancing the g-pawn to launch a direct kingside attack. Then, if they play knight to d5, you trade the knights and follow up with pawn to c4. At first glance, it may look risky. You're opening lines in front of your king. But here's the key. The queen can't take the c4 pawn because your bishop is guarding it. And if they take with the pawn, that's a critical mistake, because now you play bishop to g2, creating a deadly battery along the long diagonal, targeting both the pawn on b7 and the rook in the corner. Black may try to respond with knight to c6, the most natural-looking move, but here comes the stunning finish. You sacrifice your queen, yes, you go full tactical mode, giving up everything, and begin a beautiful attack. Now notice that your rook on d1 cuts off the king's escape. So after the queen sacrifice, king to a7 is forced. Then you follow up with rook to d7, and it's check. Here's where it gets funny. Your pawn on g5 actually helps the attack. The king can't run forward, so it must retreat again, and now you don't even need a flashy checkmate. You calmly bring one more piece into the attack. The position becomes completely hopeless for black. Eventually, after black tries something, anything, you reach our favorite moment. You deliver rook to d8 check again, and suddenly your opponent realizes something's wrong. They try to capture the rook, but wait, it's an illegal move. Why? Because it's a double check. And in double checks, the king must move. But there's nowhere safe left. And with that, rook to d7 finishes the game in style.